Welcome to day one of the Creator Lab here at NAB Show. We have 4 days of amazing sessions, all kind of great insight about the creator economy. We've got classes from Adobe and a lot of our other sponsors. We've got AMAs. We have one that was late ad. How many people here have heard of Mark Rober? He's not going to be here, but we have a bunch of members of his creator team who are going to be here tomorrow on stage doing an AMA. So you can ask them what it's like to work for Mark Rober. And that's just one of many things we've got going on over the next couple days. I'm Jim Louderback. I'll be your host for a good section of the Creator Lab. My coworker around here somewhere, Robin Raskin, is hosting the rest of it. We are going to get started with what I like to do when I do events like this is to really kicking it off with the state of the creator economy. Where are we? What's going on? What does the future look like? We're going to deep dive right into it right now. And we're going to talk about everything from shifting algorithms to AI and how it may or may not be changing the world, media mergers, monetization, how today's creators navigate the evolution and the revolution that's going on right now. And then we'll talk about the industry leaders that see it all, the data, the brands, the business, the creators themselves. So let's figure out where the economy is going. Let's get a sense of where we are now with this amazing session. I'm just going to tell you who they are, invite them up on stage. They'll talk here for about 30 minutes, but then we're trying something cool out this year. For those of you who want to talk to the speakers afterwards, we're going to do an AMA with the speakers for 20 minutes or so over there at Studio C. So when we're done, I'm just going to gather them and hopefully as many of you that want to come along, we'll go over there and we'll just sit and chat. I'll run around with a microphone, ask questions. We can all just connect with each other and the speakers. So with that said, let's get started. Brit Starr, CMO, CreatorIQ is our moderator. Our speakers, Leslie Morgan, owner of At Every Problem Solved, Jasmine Enberg, who's vice president and principal analyst for eMarketer, and Natalie Jarvey, author. Like and subscribe at The Ankler, a relatively new newsletter about the creator economy. So, Brit, the stage is yours. Big round of applause, please.
Let's see. Are we already on? We are. No time to waste. Really excited to have this conversation today. As Jim said, I think the state of the creator economy is constantly changing. So when we talk about the future, we're talking about now. We're talking about today. I think anytime you look beyond the next 6 to 12 months in an industry like ours that's rapidly accelerating at an increasing pace, you've jumped the shark a little bit. So we're going to really ground the conversation in what's going on today that's shaping the future. What do you need to know for the next 6 to 12 months to really future-proof your businesses, whether you sit on the side as a creator, as a producer, as a brand. Everyone is involved in this economy, and I'm really excited. We have some great experts from all sides of that ecosystem to share perspective. I think before we get started, I do want to give you an opportunity just to very quickly introduce yourself, where you come from, and what you love about this space specifically.
So I'm Jasmine. I'm Vice President and Principal Analyst at eMarketer, leading our coverage of social media and the creator economy. I'm based in LA, so not too far from here. What I love about the creator economy is that I started off covering the business of social media back 7-8 years ago, and just seeing how these platforms really have changed, embraced creators, consumers have embraced creators, and how that has really kind of shifted out of social media and into the broader media landscape. And just seeing that evolution has been really fascinating.
Amazing. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Natalie Jarvey, and I have been writing about the creator economy on and off since 2010, so before it was even called the creator economy. I really charted, Hollywood's kind of interest in signing stars early on, signing creators early on, the whole wave of MCN acquisitions in Hollywood, which, kind of the boom and bust of that movement. And now I think is a really interesting moment to be writing about creators, because it feels like there's a ton of interest in Hollywood on what they're doing and who their audiences are, and the power that they have to reach audiences that Hollywood is not reaching today. And I'm doing all of that as part of a new newsletter for the Ankler Media called Like and Subscribe. So check it out. It's been a lot of fun. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Leslie Morgan. I run a consultancy called Every Problem Solved. I typically work with very high-profile creators to diversify their businesses off of the platforms they're renting. A few key creators I've worked with are Chadwell, Clay, and V Quaint. They have an awesome HQ here in Vegas. Michelle Phan, Hank and John Green. I also work with tech companies and other creator economy businesses looking to figure out ways how to actually partner with the right optimal creators, and been in this space for almost 20 years.
Amazing. Okay, well, we have to start with the elephant in the room, the uncertainty of TikTok of 2025, TikTok Gate. Jasmine, I'll kick it off to you. I know you're speaking to the BBC later on tonight. Where are we today with TikTok?
Well, just in the past 72 hours, technically a lot has happened. So we saw Trump sign another executive order extending the deadline for the sale. We also saw ByteDance, which owns TikTok, of course, really make a statement kind of for the first time talking about how there's looking for a solution and in discussions with the U.S. government. And that's really been a softening of the stance that they've taken publicly, where they've been saying that they absolutely will refuse a sale. The catch, of course, is that they said that China would have to approve any solution they come up with. So that really is the wild card. But in practice, really for creators and advertisers, not much has changed over the past year that we've really been talking about this, right? And so we haven't seen consumer engagement drop off, except, of course, during the brief shutdown in January. But we saw consumers return to the platform very quickly. Advertisers also came back very quickly. And because this is a saga that has been going on for so long, most creators, advertisers already have a game plan in place. They have, put contingency planning together, have been diversifying their strategies. So, TikTok is still in limbo, and those same practices that they've been using for the past couple of months to a year still apply.
Yeah, we've definitely seen that in our data as well. Just no slowdown in terms of brands activating creators on TikTok through these past few months, with no signs of slowing down. I do think we've seen the diversification across comparable content formats. YouTube Shorts specifically has been an area that has been increasing triple digit, like 700+% year on year in terms of the number of campaigns run on that platform with creators. So I think that's a really interesting perspective. It's really easy to get swayed by a lot of the speculation, but behavior hasn't really changed.
The one thing I will say is that there has been a mindset shift among consumers, brands, and among creators. So what we've seen is that marketers, for example, are less likely to be thinking TikTok first. So when they're working with creators, many of them, if not all of them, are now requiring these creators to be active on another platform. You're also seeing creators, of course, diversify their platforms, with YouTube and Instagram really being the top two, but they're also going to platforms where they have more control over their content, their audiences, and their monetization, because I think many of them were caught by surprise when TikTok turned off for a couple of days, or less than a couple of days, really. And they realized that, they are reliant on a platform that they really don't have any control over.
My hot take is that I think this is a huge geopolitical story whose outcome is ultimately not going to matter at all.
Absolutely.
TikTok is a hugely powerful platform. It's amazing for discovery, and it has certainly changed the way that many people consume this content. I mean, the algorithm in particular, the way it surfaces videos to people, it definitely changed the game in social media. But at the end of the day, most smart creators are diversifying. They're on every platform, and they're not making that much money on TikTok to begin with. It's not necessarily a huge platform for monetization at this point. So I think TikTok goes away tomorrow, and most creators are fine. And if it stays, that's great, but they've already diversified and are ready to focus on other platforms anyway.
I think when you're thinking about established big creators, yes, that's absolutely true. They're going to be fine. I think what TikTok really did, though, was change the game for smaller emerging creators. And I think what we're going to see a big impact is in the number of new creators that are coming into the market and trying to make a living off of creating content. That is going to be harder without TikTok. But for large creators, you're right. Most of them have already diversified. They're not just on TikTok. They have multiple revenue streams, and they're going to be able to weather whatever change happens to TikTok.
But it's really about them creating longer form content. I mean, we saw this with Vine, right? Like, this is like rinse repeat. Vine happened, everybody translated over to YouTube. It's the same thing. The challenge is the folks that are like so hyper focused on the short form content. How do you then figure out how to do long form? I'm finding with the creators that I work with, their mindset in terms of the short form to long form, they're a little bit more challenged by that because the rate of churn on short form is so much quicker than what it takes to do long form content. And what is the strategy and how are they creating those like narrative arcs, etc.? Because it's a much different game for them than short form and beyond just like compilations.
Actually, I'd love to kind of double click on that. When we talk about these learning curves or paths ahead of creators, where do you see creators moving today, both with the challenges in terms of content creation and the diversification that needs to happen, but also with monetization? How are creators monetizing today? What are the most sustainable paths? Kind of how do you see that future laying out?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely see it more with longer form YouTube. I think the short form content, I mean, I had a creator that's like, I've got 3 cents, like on RPM. Way. I was like, whoa, you can start compiling that content going longer form, right? So that's number one. I think, you know, you're probably seeing it in terms of like Substack communities off the back of, you know, independent journalists, et cetera, right? I think that's kind of having its boom. I mean, I'm even seeing, I follow a lot of, shorter form creators across like TikTok and Instagram. There's a handful of them that are starting to convert their audience to subscribe on the platform, which I find so interesting. And it's like, subscribe to me on Instagram, subscribe to me on TikTok, subscribe to me. And they're literally saying that pretty consistently. What's interesting is when you look at kind of the conversion rates, even though they're small, right? It's like 1.5 million on Instagram. He's got maybe 1,000 subs on Instagram because I took a look at his stats and, you know, $5 a pop, but like, over time, like that $5,000 a month, he's not making that off of monetizing off of Instagram. There is no monetization. I mean, the monetization off of things like Meta or any other TikTok, right? Unless you're trying to convert to like live shop on TikTok, you're not making money. YouTube is still the platform to monetize off the back of, full stop, the end. And then I think, you know, you've got folks that are doing things like Kajabi, right? And building classes. And, you know, I think you have those creators that can fit into those spaces. But, you know, a lot of these kind of shorter form creators I'm seeing start to leverage like a subby community distinctly on those particular platforms.
It is really interesting. I mean, YouTube turned 20 this year. It's not a new platform. It is the establishment in the creator space now. And to your point, Jasmine, about, you know, discovery, it is a really hard platform to launch on, to start on, and to get discovered on. And so it is the platform where you can make the most money, and really monetize your audience. But it's very hard for creators. I interviewed one a month ago or so who said, you know, I've been investing in videos. You know, you have to have a certain kind of quality to your content on YouTube. She had been investing there. She hadn't been building the audience she needed to see. And she said, I'm leaving YouTube. I'll keep my videos there, but I'm not going to make new videos. I'm going to focus on Substack, where I can, you know, actually create this relationship with my followers where they will pay me for my content. And that is a much better way to fund what I'm doing. So I think we are at this kind of interesting inflection point where YouTube absolutely is the place to be, you know, if you're a TikToker or an Instagrammer who wants to start, you know, converting to longer form content, but it can be a really hard platform to be successful on.
It's really hard. It's a really hard platform for brands too. You know, I mean, I think YouTube, because of and despite its scale, it really hasn't been able to bring in marketers the same way that TikTok and Instagram have. And so for the first time this year, we're expecting 50% of US brands to work with creators and influencers on YouTube. So there's certainly a lot of that interest there, but because it is so many different things to so many different people, I think it's very daunting for a lot of marketers. It also feels much more resource heavy when you have to work with a creator making long form video. It's more difficult to scale. And the reality is also that YouTube's tools really haven't been as intuitive or as easy to use as, say, Meta's or TikTok's.
So I think what's really interesting there, two things came up. One is the role of the traditional platforms for discoverability specifically, and the shift of the algorithms into a content first approach. So on YouTube, for example, it's very likely that 20% of your views are going to come from subscribers, but 80% are going to non-subscribers. And so this idea of content first discoverability and how you get discovered, especially as an emerging creator on these platforms, but then bring your communities into these more private channels where you have more control. Is that something you see more broadly? Do you think the role of social media, like traditional social media, is really gearing towards discoverability for creators today, and then monetization will be off platform?
Well, I mean, I think the first role of these platforms is discoverability, right? There really is no match for the social platforms when you're thinking about distribution. In terms of their own monetization policies, I agree with both of you. I mean, creators just generally aren't making a lot of money off of their programs. But if you think about how most creators are making the majority of their income, and of course it varies on an individual level, a lot of that is still coming from brand deals. According to our forecast, about 60% of all the money that U.S. creators will generate this year will come from brand sponsorships. And they're still looking mostly for the social platforms. So I think there's going to be, yes, definitely a shift to these smaller community focused, more private platforms, but social media is still going to be incredibly important as both distribution and monetization.
So the brand partnership thing is interesting. We've seen that number still be the majority of a creator's income. Our last survey said about 70%, but that number is actually declining instead of increasing, which is quite interesting. When it comes to brand partnerships, how do you see the role of brand partnerships evolving in the creator economy? What do creators need to know to kind of sit in the driver's seat of brand partnerships?
I mean, I just saw a post on LinkedIn from Evan Morgenstern, who runs Celeb. It's like a celebrity influencer agency. And what he said was really kind of interesting to me because he felt like creators were the marketers and brands just want them to be sellers. And they can't necessarily do both. And on the brand side, you know, working in creator space, right, with brands in that way, I mean, I've been in this 20 years. I feel like I'm still educating brands of like, okay, well, what's your paid strategy? Like, are you going to amplify this? What are your targets? Like, if you think that my creator is suddenly going to convert, you know, X amount, and I've dealt with like very high profile 150 million sub creators that like just can't convert, or the conversion is very specific to a specific kind of brand. And they think, oh, well, I'm going to get millions and millions of downloads or not. That's just not a thing. And so from my perspective, right, that's the piece that needs to start shifting, because it's great as a marketing tool for you, but you just want to automatically see some crazy conversion numbers. That's just not a thing. And even for creators, when they're converting off the back of their social platforms, you know, you're lucky if it's like 1%, you know?
Yeah. So CreatorIQ is a software platform. Think of it as CRM, like Salesforce, but for creator marketing. And so we work with 1,400 of the largest, most innovative brands in the world running their creator programs at scale through our technology. And we see this all the time too. Like the brand playbook needs to change. When we talk about running creators, it is way beyond the campaign level into a true evergreen program where you are building a community, nurturing a community, and activating different facets of your community based on the outcomes they drive. Because some creators are great at converting, some creators are great at driving awareness, some are great at both, but not always. And so understanding what you're trying to achieve as a brand and being able to map that back to the creators that are driving those outcomes, I think is a big unlock. I think too, one of the things that holds brands up, and I'd love to get your opinion, is measurement. It's really hard still to connect campaign outcomes to business objectives and outcomes. I'd love to hear from you the state of measurement where you think it's really missing in terms of, as we invest bigger dollars, higher stakes, what do we need to know that this is working?
Well, I think lagging measurement is the number one roadblock to unlocking more influencer marketing dollars in general, and it has been for a very long time. To your earlier point, I think one of the big problems still is that we're in this situation now where I think every brand realizes that influencer marketing is a full funnel marketing tactic. Creators can drive everything from awareness to conversion, but they still don't quite know how to make that happen. And one of the problems is that they're not setting their goals or their KPIs in advance. The other problem is they're still using outdated metrics to identify creators that they want to work with. And so, many of them also rely on things like gut feeling. They're like, my kid likes to watch this YouTube creator, we should work with him. But that doesn't mean it's aligned with their business. And so what we really need to do is start at the very beginning and update those metrics and start thinking about what really matters. More nuanced value metrics like engagement rate. It's not perfect, but it starts to help. And also looking at things like creative alignment. Across these platforms, it's not just about, the ability to drive sales, but how they're doing it. What kind of content are they creating? And I think that will ultimately help to improve results. And the other thing that I've been writing about recently is pay transparency. I think one of the issues is also that creator pay rates are all over the place and brands don't know if they're spending their money wisely. There's no sort of standardized framework for paying creators. And honestly, I don't think in the near future, we're going to get to an industry-wide framework for it, but there should at least be internal pay transparency within brands. And I think that will start to help them understand the true value of their investments and be able to better prove the value of influencer marketing overall.
It's remarkable to me that we still don't have a standard of measurement in this industry. And I guess it's not surprising if you take a step back because it is still a big unwieldy industry. There's no, kind of governing body. There's no one group. And there's so many different creators with different goals and different objectives. But, coming from writing about Hollywood, in TV for a long time, it was Nielsen, and in movies, it was box office. And there would be real value in having some sort of established and agreed upon way of measuring success for these creators. I don't know that it's follower count or subscriber count. That doesn't tell the whole story. Engagement, to your point, I think gets you there a little bit closer, but maybe isn't perfect either. I mean, it's hard for me as a journalist when I'm looking to write about a creator to be able to unpack their success, their growth, their momentum. All I'm seeing are view counts or follower counts. And I often have to go to them or their teams and say, can you dig a little deeper for me and help better tell the story of what is happening, on the back end and what you're seeing in terms of this creator's growth or, why suddenly they're hitting their stride.
But I also think on the opposite end with the brands, there needs to be a level of transparency with the creator. I have never had a creator understand what did they actually drive for them. And I think there's a lot of gatekeeping with brands because if they start revealing those things, especially if they blew it out of the park for them, they're going to, have to maybe pay a creator more. Maybe that's it. I don't know. But, I think if a creator understood how something was doing for them, their conversion rates, right? They can also, especially if it's a longer term partnership, start to really rethink how they are marketing that particular product. And so they're on the other side of it, there's zero transparency. No creator ever gets any metrics from a brand that I've had an experience with. And I've tried many, many times.
Yeah. We're talking about the industry and how it's growing up. I think measurement standardization is a huge piece of an industry as it's maturing because we're nascent, right? It's exploding at a rapid pace, but this is a very young industry still. What else do you foresee kind of needing to be removed? What are the other roadblocks that will be kind of figured out as the industry matures?
Sure. I think one of at least from where I sit, researching the creator economy, one of the biggest challenges for me, and I think it has a ripple effect across the entire industry, is that we treat creators like a monolith, right? And they really aren't. So if you're thinking about some of the top name YouTube creators, their experiences, their businesses are incredibly different than, say, an affiliate marketing creator on TikTok. all of these are valid experiences and they're valid businesses. But I do think in order for there to be more growth, maturity, and professionalization within the creator economy, we do need to start to have a little bit more stratification and understanding, because that will help with, identification, measurement, goal setting, and really understanding what to expect from the different types of partnerships and businesses that exist.
I would add, it's remarkable that we're still at this place of having to kind of educate people who aren't in this industry oftentimes that it is a business. I see this
even
a lot.
People in the industry.
That too. But I see this a lot, with Hollywood, kind of seeing creators who maybe have a viral moment or something as, oh, this kind of like funny, interesting thing. Maybe we can leverage that to make a TV show or, put cast them in our movie or whatever. And, there needs to be more recognition that like this in and of itself is a powerful entertainment medium and business. And it doesn't necessarily need to be a stepping stone into Hollywood or into some other business, that it in and of itself can be the end goal for creators.
That's such a good point. I think 5 years ago, Signal Fire said that being a creator was one of the fastest growing small business sectors in the United States. And it really is. It is a small business. We've talked about multiple monetization strategies even on this panel, but understanding that this is a business, it is an ecosystem that can create opportunity beyond, right? That's why it's the creator economy. I want to touch a little bit on the Hollywood. I think the entertainment and kind of traditional entertainment versus creator sphere is really interesting. What do you think traditional media can learn from creators, and how do you see that dialogue shaping over time?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting moment this year. I would say end of last year, beginning of this year might be the moment that kind of Hollywood clicks into creators in a real way and understands their power. And, we're seeing that with the, Mr. Beast show, Beast Games on Amazon, that was hugely successful. And I think that now there's a ripple effect of that. And there's a lot of talk right now about deals being done. I think that there's a couple of things Hollywood needs to remember and can kind of learn from creators. One is, it's not about just, entertaining people or you're telling a story. It's also, creators are good at what they do because they are showing you a version of themselves. It's maybe not 100% who they are when the camera's not running, but there is something very authentic about that. You can't just take a creator and plop them into a movie and think that that's going to work and that that's going to convert people. Much in the same way we talk about conversion with brands, the same thing happens in Hollywood all the time. There's this assumption that, all of their audience is just going to follow them to this new medium. It doesn't always pan out. And I think that Hollywood could take a step back and look at really what do creators do well, which is that authenticity piece. It is something a little bit less polished, a little bit less developed. There's not the same note process, and figure out like, how do we tap into that? I also then think outside of that, looking at creators as marketers, the fandom component is really valuable, and you can take a lot away from that, in terms of how Hollywood markets their movies, their TV shows, and tries to kind of build a world around their IP.
But Natalie, what you said is really interesting because I feel like Hollywood has tried that, right? Like Grace Helbig had her talk show, and then Lily Singh had a talk show, and now obviously, yes, Mr. Beast. And, there's, for like dialogues about whether that was successful or not successful. And we don't need to get into that. But, again, it feels like a little bit of a rinse repeat, and you're kind of, they're trying to figure out the conversion because again, they had those people in the day. They're like, oh, they're going to convert for me. I'm going to have Grace Helbig. She's going to blow up our E show. And it just didn't happen.
I would argue, I could write a whole dissertation on this topic, but I would argue that in those cases, I don't think that they were necessarily letting Grace be Grace and letting her do what she was successful at. And same with Lily. I spent a lot of time with Lily in the lead up to that show. They were filming those episodes months before they were airing. It was just not what Lily was great at and what people loved about her. And so, I do think that there's a version of creators who can be successful in Hollywood, and maybe we're starting to see that. I think there's still some work to be done, but those early examples just weren't it.
When was this? Was this a few years back?
Oh, this was quite a while ago.
And I think that's part of it too. I mean, we're in a different point now. And I think creators and influencers have been legitimized in a way that they weren't, even a couple of years ago. I think about, the marketing landscape, and I've been calling 2024 a year of legitimacy because it really was the first time that you saw every CMO, pretty much every brand being like, we need to work with creators and influencers. And it wasn't that they were rushing towards them with open arms, but because we're in this moment within the market, because of some of these big things that have happened, like Mr. Beast games on Amazon, that it's just too big to ignore. And I feel like traditional media is part of that, thinking, we have to make this work, and probably will take a little bit of a different approach than they did previously.
I just hope that they market it appropriately. Like, they need to still put marketing dollars into those shows.
Yeah, fair. All right. So 43 seconds to go. We didn't even get into AI, so please follow us over to the stage just right over here. We can continue with AMA. Really quickly, in like 3 words or less, we talked a ton about what is changing. What won't change?
Ooh, a lot. Well, there will always be gatekeepers and middlemen, whether that's platforms or brands. It's not a discouragement. It's just a reality. And creators and those gatekeepers need each other to survive.
I think fans will always follow the good content. I mean, these creators are incredibly powerful because they are producing something that people want to see, and that will never change, whether the, creator at the top of the leaderboard changes.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with all of that. I think there's always going to be creators, and there's going to be a new crop constantly. And the ability to create content is easier than ever.
Well, thank you so much for spending time with us. Thank you to our panelists, and follow us over if you want to continue the conversation.
All right. Let's give it up for Brit, Leslie, Jasmine, and Natalie. Thank you very much.